The Seahawks, as beat up as they are still dancing and will hit the dance floor in Green Bay this week to take on a well-rested Packers club. 6 predictions are on the way. First, though, let's check out some numbers that you can use to form a prediction of your own. Okay, so stopping the Seahawks comes down to one question. Can you stop Russell Wilson?
Metcalf in for the touchdown.
Wilson pretty much put the Hawks on his shoulders and carried them to victory last week with both his arm and legs. Not only did he throw for over 300 yards, he also led the team in rushing, with Marshawn Lynch and Travis Homer picking up just 19 yards on 17 carries.
He finds the opening, and he picks up 22 yards.
Wilson typically doesn't lead the Hawks in rushing. Seattle's run game finished with the 4th most rushing yards on the strength of 4.6 yards a carry this year. But it was clear from last week's game they are a shell of their former self on this front. Now, they were up against one of the best rush defenses, and stopping the run isn't a Green Bay specialty, as they gave up 4.7 yards a run this season and were 23rd in rush yards per game allowed. So you'd think Homer and Lynch would see an uptick in production against the Pack. But still, it's safe to assume you'll also see Wilson take off a fair amount, just as he did last week.
Wilson picks up the first down.
Wilson may not have run the ball as much this year compared to years past, but he's still one of the best when he does. And you can see now that it's playoff time, he's more willing to break that skill set back out. The Packers, however, have handled QBs fairly well, and they've faced a decent number of mobile QBs, so allowing the 3rd fewest rush yards to QBs does mean something in their case. But the Hawks' passing game also has an advantage, especially now that DK Metcalf has made it pretty clear he's legit.
You've got an open man in Metcalf to the 50-yard line.
Metcalf had a monster first playoff game, and his season totals in his first year were more than impressive. Paired with Tyler Lockett, Seattle has developed a knack for the big play. 7th in yards per attempt, 7th in yards per completion, 11th most pass plays of 20-plus yards.
Wilson's going to go deep, wide open, and into the hands of David Moore.
Wilson taking deep shots, a staple of his game. Remember that stat because the Packers' secondary has been pretty good against shorter to intermediate throws. They held teams to the 3rd lowest completion rate and ranked 6th best in passer rating, but they were 21st in yards per pass attempt allowed, 27th in yards per completion allowed, and tied for 21st in giving up pass plays of 20-plus yards. What they could really use then is a big game from its pass rush, and they happen to have one of the best sack duos in the game.
Za'Darius Smith, his 11th sack of the year.
Za'Darius Smith and Preston Smith both finished the year with 12-plus sacks. The rest of the D didn't provide too much help, as Green Bay finished middle of the pack in sacks, but Seattle was tied for 23rd in sacks allowed, so Smith squared should have a chance to make an impact. So what about when the Packers have the ball? Of course, it's obvious to start with Aaron, but in this case, we aren't talking about Rodgers.
Jones inside the 5 and into the end zone.
Aaron Jones didn't just have a breakout season. He has been the key figure in several Packers wins this year, his abilities as a receiver coming into play on several occasions. But the reason he could lead the way again in this game, Seattle's inability to stop the run. The Eagles gained 4.6 yards a carry against them last week, and on the year, Seattle allowed a whopping 4.9 yards a carry. Only 4 teams fared worse at stopping ball carriers. And when it comes to defending backs as receivers, they're just as rough. Only 3 teams gave up more receiving yards than the Hawks did. But as far as how they do against the pass in general, they were one of the best at picking QBs off.
That ball is intercepted!
All those INTs also helped them finish 3rd in takeaways overall and 9th in passer rating allowed. But picking off Rodgers, even in a so-called down year, is still almost impossible.
Pressure going deep down the middle. It's caught for the touchdown.
Rodgers and the Packers' offense hasn't blown anyone away, but he only threw 4 balls to the wrong team, and he had the lowest interception rate in football. And while Rodgers has tried to will some of his young receivers to relevance, Davante Adams remains his go-to when things get tough.
Adams has it, and he's in. Touchdown, Packers.
But even with Adams, Green Bay's passing attack is mediocre by most measurements, not nearly as dangerous as years past. That has led to issues on 3rd down, where Green Bay finished 23rd, which then leads to problems getting into the red zone, the Packers' 17th in red zone attempts. If they can get there, the stats say they should have some success.
He's in. Touchdown, Green Bay.
Green Bay finished 8th best at scoring a TD once they got inside the 20. Seattle's D, meantime, was 26th at giving up 6 when teams entered their red zone. And for what it's worth, Seattle is pretty good at getting the ball inside the 20 and converting it when they do.
Marshawn Lynch, touchdown.
Green Bay, however, is much tougher when they defend a shorter field than Seattle is, setting up a strength versus strength matchup. Okay, last week we saw one YouTube user pick the Hawks-Eagles score at 16-10, which was the closest one to nailing it. Keep the predictions coming and the analysis. For now, we're done with ours, so it's time to leave you with our predictions.
Second down and 2. Little flip here to Jones, gets a block, and Jones out in front. They're trying to chase him down. He's inside the 10, and Jones down the sideline. He is in for the touchdown. 67 yards.